Hello and welcome to our open house. My name is Michael Moyes and I'm the Director of Admissions for Berklee Online. And I've been lucky enough to work with our special guest on numerous occasions, open houses in different classes. Today we're going to have a 30-minute workshop about beat slicing using Kontakt 5, followed by about 10 minutes of Q&A. And thank you so much to any of you who have submitted some Q&A questions in advance. We're going to get to those. But if you didn't have a chance, there's a little chat box, and you can feel free to enter some questions there as well. You can do it throughout the entire presentation, and we'll be addressing them at the end. So who is our special guest? It is none other than Loudon Stearns. Loudon, as many of you know, is a bass player, a producer, a laptop musician, among many other things. He's also an associate professor in the contemporary writing and production department here at the Berklee College of Music. And he's an instructor with Berklee Online as well. He's got a brand new course called Composing and Producing Electronic Music, Part 2. He has another course called Composing and Producing Electronic Music, Part 1, as well as our Advanced Music Production with Ableton Live class. Right. So he's been very busy with us, and we're really lucky to have him here today. So without further ado, you can go ahead and teach us about beat slicing.
Great. So today we're going to be looking at Kontakt, and so we look at Kontakt throughout the Composing and Producing Electronic Music 2 course. It takes Kontakt really from the very beginning, kind of what it's capable of, and then we cover pretty much everything in the course. But one thing that we don't look at in depth, we call it CPEM, Composing and Producing Electronic Music. One thing we don't really look at in depth in CPEM 2 is the actual beat slicing capability. So if you're familiar with like Reason's Rex capabilities, where it can slice up an audio file and allow you to play the different slices on a controller, Kontakt has that kind of function built in, but it just goes way beyond. So we're going to kind of look at that capability here, and also some of the really fun modulation things that we can do once we have it sliced. So I'm working with Kontakt here, and there are a bunch of ways to create a new instrument. And actually in the CPEM course, we do a lot of just building sounds right from scratch. I'm an atomic kind of guy. I like just to build things right from just one audio file. So we're gonna make this from scratch here, and I have a groove. We can kind of check it out if we want here. And then we're going to slice it up so I can play it on my controller here. Now, there's a bunch of ways that you can bring an audio file in to create a new instrument in Kontakt. If I was to double click on that audio file, it would create a new instrument, but it would probably map it across the entire keyboard, which really isn't what we want here. That would change pitch as you play it up and down the keyboard. Instead, we want to bring this into a single key. So the first thing I'm going to do is just double click in the Kontakt multi-rack to create a new instrument. And then we'll edit that instrument by clicking on the wrench, and then immediately go to the mapping editor, which shows us notes horizontally and velocity vertically. And I'd like to place that sound on middle C, or C2. So you notice when you bring this in, as you drag them down, it'll cover it controls your note range that it covers. And we'll just bring this down so it goes on just a single note there, right? So if I was to hold a key on my controller now, I can hear that played back at its original tempo. Now my goal is to be able to play on the controller and play those individual pieces of the drum, just the first hit, just the snare, just the hi-hat, or those moments in time on the different keys of my controller here. Now when you bring something into Kontakt, it really helps to understand the kind of hierarchy of Kontakt, in that it really is a deep program. And you're going to find that once you get into it, it can be kind of intimidating because there are so many options. But the one thing that really helped me the most was knowing the overall hierarchy, which is really a sample is an individual audio file. That's all it is. And you'll even see the word sample, like right here. It says sample, and it gives me the name of the audio file itself. But once I've dragged in a sample into the mapping editor, I've created two other things. I've created a zone, and a zone is a sample, but it has some metadata. Like when I dragged up and down, I chose what key range it went over. So that's part of that metadata. So a zone includes the sample, but also includes the key range that it's on, the velocity range that zone covers, the root note, which is the note that plays back the sample at its original pitch, which you'll see as a yellow key in the bottom here. Also the velocity of the sample, the panning of the sample, any fine tuning of it, and a couple other things are right in that zone. Now a zone lives inside a group, and a group can be a collection of zones, and that's where you can add modulation and effects. And then a group lives in an instrument, which is this whole guy right here that we created. And an instrument lives in a multi, and you can have multiple instruments played back at once. So knowing that hierarchy makes a big difference, because the terminology and where you can apply effects and modulation, that it really is the key to unlocking the whole thing. So once again, a sample is an audio file. A zone is a sample with some metadata, like key range and velocity range and root note. A group is a collection of zones, and that group is where you put modulation and also effects. An instrument is a collection of groups, and you can also have an effects at that level. And then a multi is a collection of instruments. So we have to understand that hierarchy as we dive into this instrument a bit. So I'd like to now slice this up into a bunch of pieces. And what I'm really going to be doing is making a separate zone out of each one of the hits, right? And really I'm going to divide it up by eighth note. So we have 16 pads on the machine controller, and my goal is to make this 16 pads be 16 separate hits. So I'll just divide up the groove by eighth notes, and I should get my 16 pads, because it's a 2-measure groove. So to do that, we're going to have to open up the wave editor. And the wave editor is where we can edit individual zones, right? We can control the sample a bit, we can do destructive editing there, and it's also where we can slice up our audio file. And as soon as I go to this area here, which is again my wave editor, we see a sync slice tab there, and I'll click on that. So we see the sync slice options, and I also have my grid options on the right here. Now we can slice this up in a variety of ways. A really common way, and actually my favorite, is just to slice it up based on a fixed grid. So slice it up on eighth notes. So that's going to make it so that each pad isn't always just a hit. It might be a hit plus a couple of things that come after that. But I feel like if you slice it up by grid, as you're playing through, you can just play quarter notes, or you can even use an arpeggiator. Everything plays back perfectly in time. And also it retains some of the natural, internal timing variations. It's a recording of a player. It has a hip hop feel, and hip hop isn't a really quantized style. It has all this kind of human feel to it. So if I was to say quantized by transient, which is this auto mode, where I can slice it up based on where the individual hits are. This is very much what you'd often do with Rex. Then it might be a little harder to retain that human feel that's kind of built in to that loop itself. So I'll go with fixed. It's also going to make it so that the 16 pads is exactly the 16 slices, which makes things pretty nice. And I'm cutting it up by eighth note here. It finds the BPM based on the loop length. So it is nice to do this with loops like from sample libraries that are already cut exactly to bar length. If you're trying this with an audio file that's not cut to bar length, you might find it a little more difficult. It might not analyze the tempo quite right, and you might have to figure that out ahead of time. I would suggest kind of cropping it, the file in your DAW ahead of time, or using a loop from a loop library that's exactly to bar length first. It's going to make this a much easier. Now, over in the sync slice, we have parameters on how it's actually going to slice the audio file. And what I'd like to do is actually map this. We say map base key. And the base key is I'm going to click a button, and it's going to slice this up into pieces. And then it's going to map those into my mapping editor. Well, what note does it start from? Right? Does it start from C2, -2? Does it start from C0? That's my base key. And I'm going to set that so it starts at C-1. And I like that because on the machine controller here, if I go to A group, I'll just show you here. If I play this, you see that little red line in my mapping editor? Well, that's right on C-1. So if I'm in the lowest group on my machine controller, it's going to be playing right on C-1. So that's where I like to start the slicing. Now, by default, auto fade time might be around 20 milliseconds. And I think the fade time is really good if you're going to be slowing down or speeding up the groove. But I'm going to be playing this back right at its original tempo. And I'm going to change the tempo of my DAW to match this, to be 95. And when you have it the same, I find that having 0 fade time really works the best. But again, if you're speeding up or slowing it down, you probably want to bring some of that fade time in. It just kind of fades out the end of each slice. So it's not so abrupt as the sample ends. But when you're just playing it straight through, I like the 0 fade time. Now, this kind of confused me when I first started using Kontakt, in that, well, how do you make the slicing happen? And it's actually this drag MIDI to host button is actually what causes the slicing to happen. So you kind of want to make sure everything's set correctly. And then what you do is you click on that and drag and drop it into your host DAW. So you just drag it onto a track. Typically, you drag it onto the track that was being routed to Kontakt so it could play back that audio file correctly. And that's what I'm going to do. I'm going to hold on that. I'm going to drag it over and drop it in a clip over here in live, and we see what happened there. It started from C-2, which is an octave lower than I really wanted it, and then it also put a clip here in live that you can see basically a chromatic scale in live there. Now, I'm going to undo that, and one of the great things about Kontakt is it has an undo built into it, which is this undo and redo button right here. Now, I've made the mistake in the past of using the Command-Z key command, the undo key command, but that'll usually go to the host DAW, and it even just happened to me, I'd hit that, and it would actually just remove Kontakt, because the last thing I did in the DAW was to actually add Kontakt to a track. So I'm going to use the undo button here in Kontakt that undoes that last step. Let me see what I set wrong here. I'm going to try this again. I'll go back to my sync slice, map base key, set to -1, and I see what I did wrong. Right here it says auto find empty keys. That's enabled, which means that it's just going to find the lowest empty key, right? The one that isn't being used and that there's enough space that it's not going to overlap another zone. And so it automatically jumped it down to C-2. If I turn that off and try this again, it'll start the mapping from C-1. Let's try that. So again, I'll drag to host. Need to enable the grid function. Always forgetting something, right? So we'll go over to the grid. Again, we'll set it up to be eighth notes like we did before. And drag to host. And we'll see that clip is set just like we wanted. So going to C-1 and up from there. And I have a chromatic scale in my DAW. It's going to play that back perfectly. So there's two options here. I could just start playing these slices on my controller. Right, and they're each a quarter note, so if I just play up this in time, we hear just the groove played back as we wanted it. I mean, as it was originally done. I can also rearrange by playing in different orders. Right, lots of interesting possibilities. Now the great thing, since this is cut to quarter notes, if I just keep a steady pulse as I play, then it's going to play back in time. So if I cut it up to transient, it's not quite as easy to play. Also notice, because I cut this up by eighth notes on the grid here, this is beat 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So I always know I'm going to get kick here and snare there. So it's nice dividing it up by eighth note because the grid works out so nicely. Now I can also just play it back from my global DAW. So if I just hit play on my DAW, I'm going to hear the groove just play back. I just play them back in time. Now there's a couple options. I could go into my DAW and rearrange the MIDI notes, which would give me different kind of patterns, kind of like playing on here. But I kind of want to get some interesting things out of this, right? You really utilize the kind of advanced features that we have in Kontakt, like adding effects and adding some modulation. So we said that modulation was added at the group level, not at the zone level. Let's actually look at that group system a little bit here in Kontakt. If I open up the group editor, I see I actually have two different groups. I have the original slice, right, which is group 1. That's going to be this guy right here. And then I have another group, which is slices mapped, which is going to be all these slices right here. And if I was to edit this group, I could change like the release characteristics or the attack characteristics or add effects. That would change everything in the group. Let me show you. If I hit this really short, we hear the sound kind of fades away a little bit when I let go of the key. I'd like it to be really abrupt. I just want it to stop. Now we have this parameter up here which says edit all groups. That means that all groups will be edited at once. Now I don't want to change this one here. I just want to change the slices mapped. So I'm going to change from edit all groups. I'll turn that off. And now I'm just editing the slices mapped groups. I can scroll to the bottom to my modulation section in Kontakt, and I see my main amplitude envelope. And I'll reduce release kind of all the way down. And now, so now I have really kind of serious control over the release of that note. And I can still hit play and hear this thing straight through. All right. Now so now you see as I did that, it changed the setting on all those slices because they're all in that one group. Now I'd like to add modulation to individual slices and maybe effects to just individual slices. To do that, they would need to be in separate groups, right? Because effects and modulation can be added at the group level. They can't be added at the sample level. So to put these in their own groups, there's a really great kind of trick to it. I can select all these slices at once, right? So they're all selected. And then I can go to the Edit menu, and we have an option for move each zone to its own group empty and move each zone to its own group clone. And I'm going to use the clone option. But before that, I just remembered one thing, and that's velocity control. Right? If I hit this quiet, it plays quiet. If I hit it hard, it plays loud. And I'd like them to be really consistent as we play. So before I put them in their own zones, I'll go up to the source editor here, the source mode, the source section here. And we're going to go to the volume knob, show its modulation section, and we see that velocity is controlling volume, and it's controlling it quite a bit. I'm going to turn that down to 0. So now, no matter how hard I hit it, it's going to be the same exact volume, just what I want. All right. Now, I can select all these zones, edit, move each zone to its own group clone. So that way, every zone that we have will be an individual group, and then we can add individual modulation to the separate groups. Now we see immediately that my group list becomes really full, right? All these different slices. I also see that as I select these, it is changing which group is selected. That's really important for us. And I also want to add select a zone via Midi. This is going to make it really easy to edit individual zones or individual groups. Because as I change through these, we see that it's selecting the different groups, and then I can start changing out their modulations. So let's adjust our interface a bit. We'll close up the mapping editor for now, close up the wave editor for now, and we're just looking at the group editor. One thing I might want to do is just reverse one of these slices. How about that one, right? So I'll just click on that one. But you see as I move to it, it's not changing which group is selected. So I have to choose select by Midi, right? Just like we did before. And now it's changing which one is selected. That one there. Let's reverse that slice. Right? And now if we listen back to the groove, which is kind of cool. So now, because they're in different groups, they can have different modulation, and we can reverse individual slices, which we couldn't do when they were just zones, right? So it's really important that we move up to the group level. Now, we can also start bringing in some interesting modulation once we're at the group level. So I might want to have sort of a turntable kind of scratch, you know, like a fake turntable, kind of a pitch modulation. On just that kind of sound on that one hip. And to do that, we'll have to introduce modulation. Now, modulation is parameters changing over time. It's one of those really important aspects of synthesis and also of sampling. So what I would like is to have this kind of sound. I play the sound, but let's see if I can do it manually here. I'll try to grab tuning like that, right? It's like kind of a record kill sort of sound. And I can get that by adding an envelope controlling tuning or controlling pitch. And we can add a modulator just by right-clicking on any parameter, choosing envelopes, and we'll go with the AHDSR envelope here. So now, not too dramatic yet. We'll do the, every time you add modulation, you're really controlling 4 different things. You have a modulation source, which we've chosen as our envelope AHDSR, right? The envelope is the modulation source. We have a modulation destination, which we've chosen as to be pitch. We have a modulation amount, right? The amount of modulation, how drastic this pitch change will be. And I can actually turn that up right here, so it's a full octave. And I have a modulation direction. Is it going to go up or down? And we have invert right here. I'll hit it down. That's kind of cool. Maybe if I don't go to invert. Let's see how we can edit this more. Now, if I want to edit this envelope itself, we have these quick jump buttons. I click on that. It actually jumps down to the bottom of the rack where that modulator is, so we can edit the modulator itself. And that's where this is the envelope that's controlling pitch. So I might want to increase the attack parameter a bit. Let's go slower. Turn sustain up. And then invert the modulation. Let's see. Pretty cool. Now, because I was just doing that one slice, let's hear this groove in action. And we can move through our program, our instrument, and change each individual slice in a different way. So envelopes, say on on pitch like this work great, and also reversing individual slices. So I might want to do this again on that slice, reverse that one, which is going to be cool. And then, you know, I might want some effects on this, right? And I wouldn't mind if certain slices had different effects than others, right? I might want to have a filter on a certain effect, on a certain slice, or a distortion on a certain slice. And again, effects are added at the group level. So because we have this configured this way, I can choose any one of these and add an effect just to it. So let's try that one. I'll add a filter to it. Let's see what happens. So I just choose that. That shows the group for me because I have select by MIDI on. And now we have group insert effects, or we can add effects at the group level. So if I want an effect to go on just an individual slice, it would have to go at the group insert effect level. If I wanted an effect on the entire groove, I would do it at the instrument effect level. The groups are all combined. The output, or the audio output of all the groups are combined together before they're sent to the instrument level. So we want this on the group level because I'd like an effect just on that slice. And I'll add a filter to it. So let's try this. We have a lot of different filter options. I'll use a low-pass filter, and I'll use a 4-pole ladder filter. Nice thumpy sound. And maybe a high resonance. And I kind of like it in motion. I wonder, maybe I could add an LFO to that to give it a kind of cool quality. So I'll control-click on that, LFO, and sign. And then, kind of neat. Let's jump down to the modulator itself, make it a little faster. And I can even make these LFOs beat synced or time synced by going over to where it says Hertz, clicking on that, and then I can choose it in metric subdivisions. Maybe 16th note would be good here. And notice when you do this, you have the subdivision and also a multiplier. So this is saying it's 1 16th note. If I change this, I'm changing how many 16th notes the LFO will move at. So we'll say 1. Now, so I'm getting an interesting kind of groove that I'm kind of digging on now. Now, the one last thing I might want to play with this that I actually really like is actually adding an arpeggiator to this, because each one of these slices is exactly an eighth note. So if I had an arpeggiator just playing eighth notes, I could just hold like 3 or 4 notes and get whole new interesting patterns out of it. And we add scripts is how we add an arpeggiator. So we're going to use the script options in Kontakt to add an arpeggiator, and these are going to go at the instrument level. So if I scroll up on my rack here, we'll see we have an option for the script editor, and you can even see how it's in this kind of lighter area of the device, and that is the instrument level. You notice that each kind of level, these layers that we're talking about, they each have a different color associated with them. This kind of nice, kind of light tan color is going to be our instrument level. I can go to my script editor. And there's tons of scripts in Kontakt. This is another thing that we don't get to dive too deep into in CPEM2, but we have plenty of chances in the class to talk in chats and things, really dive into these. And we have an option here for preset, and we're going to look for the arpeggiators. There's a ton of options here. Let's go to, I think it's in performance. Oh, I forget now. Look at all the options we have. Sequencing, that's it. We got our arpeggiator here. So an arpeggiator will play through a set of notes that you have. Now the usual usage for an arpeggiator is on a melodic instrument of some sort. I might have a piano sound, I hold a chord, and the arpeggiator will go through those notes of the piano to create kind of the idea of a piano player arpeggiating through a pattern. But since we have a drum sound, if I set my rate to be eighth note, right there, I can hold a set of notes. And we get all these different patterns just based on how I play the chord. And because everything is eighth notes, because we use that eighth note grid, it always works out beautifully with the global tempo. Each one of these is actually pretty cool. and we can just kind of play different patterns. Now, one thing that I like with this is the hold option, which allows me to play a group of notes and just keeps on playing, which then I can start manipulating parameters on my filters and effects on the whole groove. I could also then just play a different, maybe different 4 notes. It's kind of strange. Like that. Right, so we can get a whole bunch of variations there. You might also want to check out might also want to check out the hold plus minus option, which I think is really cool because this we're allowed to add or remove from what's being held down. So if I hold one note, I'm going to play that one, play a second, it's going to play between those two, add a third, add a third. So now it's just going through those, but I can remove one of those now, maybe put another one in, so like this. So what it's doing is adding or removing from it, adding or removing from the texture. And I'm back down to that first one, and then I have none when I pull that last one off. So it's like adding to the arpeggiator and removing from it just by which notes you hold, you press or release. So those are the techniques I wanted to show you with this. Obviously, there's lots of possibilities, and hopefully you've seen this not as kind of the end game, but as kind of a launching off point, right? Because we have all these different possibilities here, right? We make individual groups, so individual groups can have different modulation, can have different effects. And then the whole instrument can have scripts like arpeggiators. The note delay options are also pretty cool. And then you can also add effects at the instrument level if you wanted to, say, filter or compress the entire groove at once. So lots of great possibilities. Kontakt is not, used so much for beat slicing. It's not the kind of focus of it. It tends to be used more for melodic instruments. But as you can see, it's quite powerful for it. And I really love these techniques. Lots of possibilities, and I hope you kind of explore them further. So, what'd you think of that? Pretty cool, right?
I thought it was really cool.
Yeah. I mean, I dig this stuff. I love sampling.
That's why you're here.
I love it. That's why I'm here, because I love it.
Yeah.
Sampling is like, it's the most fun for me. That's why I was psyched to make this course. In CPEM 1, we talk about synthesis the whole time. So we use a Native Instruments Massive, and we take it to a huge, huge extent. And then in CPEM 2, we use Massive also just for the first couple lessons and take it all the super advanced features in it. But then we get to look at sampling. And so that's why I was just most excited about this class, because it's my favorite thing, man. I've lost hours, days, weeks of my life just playing with Kontakt and with samplers, and I'm really excited to see what my students will do with it, because I know
it's an incredible tool.
Yeah, it's really fun.
So one question that came in, and one
Sure.
question that we hear sometimes is, you obviously are using Kontakt at a pretty high level here. Do students need to come to the CPEM class already with experience in Kontakt?
No. So
Okay.
we've built it. I mean, it goes fast, right? So I think it's like the third week of the course. We take from the very beginnings, right? So it really is in the about third week, I give everyone one sample. It's like a bass note. And then we go step by step how to go from a bass note to build up a complete instrument, and we talk about all of these things. Now it's fast. We're covering a lot in a single week, but you don't have to have any prior knowledge.
Okay.
Yeah, we take it from the beginning.
Are there any DAW limitations, or what DAW would you recommend the students use with Kontakt?
With Kontakt, you're going to have to use a DAW that works with some kind of third-party plugins. So it works with AU or VST plugins. So things like Ableton Live, Pro Tools, Logic works great. Some DAWs don't have the ability to run with external plugins like this, but a lot of them, like Reason, right? You can't use external plugins so much, but that has a built-in sampler that does all the same things. So, my hope with this course is that we're not just studying Kontakt. I mean, there's a lot of music, and it's a lot of just concepts, right? And I actually think it's really valuable to be able to take maybe a concept in Kontakt and apply it in Reason's, say, NNXT. So I think someone, that was a little more advanced, maybe has taken a couple sound design or synthesis courses, could absolutely take the course using Reason and would just see what we teach here and then apply it in NNXT. And I honestly think they'd probably have a better understanding of it after having gone through that, right? Because if you can do that, then you're proving that you understand the concept because you're applying it somewhere else. And I actually have a lot of students in the CPEM 1 class that, to kind of push themselves further, will take all the lessons we do in Massive and apply them in another synthesizer. And it seems to be those are the ones that kind of really end up getting it at a huge level at the end. So, I think every DAW would work, and we'd definitely be able to work with you. But if you are working with something that doesn't have Kontakt or Massive, you probably want to have some good experience first, and then move into it. But yeah,
it's very good to know. Some students, let me see how to phrase this. We've got a lot of questions coming in.
Oh, great!
Which is really good.
Yeah.
Do you need to take CPEM 1 before taking CPEM 2? I know there's kind of a CPEM 1's been around for a very long time, and students are kind of...
Couple years.
Yeah, well...
it's a long time in electronic music. Yeah.
You've got a lot of students that are interested, so... and people are asking about CPEM 2 quite a bit.
Right.
Can they jump right into that class?
I think it'd be a mistake to jump right into CPEM 2. CPEM 1 is a prerequisite. You have to finish that material. And the thing is, so much that we cover in CPEM 2 just relies on that fundamental concepts that we learned in the first one. And it really is not just technology. So I know we've been focusing on sampling and synthesis in this discussion, but there's all these musical discussions that we have throughout the courses as well, right? We talk heavily about rhythm and harmony. And I really want to be able in CPEM 2 to just hit the ground running. And I really do assume at the beginning of CPEM 2 that you understand everything that happened in that first one. And we kind of divide the two courses by style, which I think is why a lot of people really want to jump into the second course, right? Because that's dubstep, right? Everyone wants that. Everyone wants that section. We have a dubstep section and down tempo. So we have all these styles that I love, and that's one reason to take it. But I think having the foundation of CPEM 1 is great. And the honest truth is, I really want everyone to take CPEM 1 because I love seeing students for 2 semesters. It's that evolution over a longer amount of time. It gives us a chance really to get a great relationship and to see a student evolve over like a year. And you can even take a break between them. So I see them at the first one and then again. It'd be really great, these great bonds form between the student and the teacher in these courses. And I just think you're doing yourself a service if you take the first one first and we get a chance to study together for longer.
Yeah. Can you give some examples of other, I know there's a laundry list of styles that are covered in both classes, but what kind of things other than dubstep are covered?
So in the new course, the CPEM 2 course, we covered dubstep. We also cover downtempo and techno. And and throughout all those, there's all these kind of subgenres, right? So we talk about glitch and we talk about minimal as kind of different sort of styles that are going on there. And one of the big focuses of CPEM 2 is really finding kind of your own personal style, right? Your own personal sound. So throughout the course, though it is like techno section and then the down tempo section and the dubstep section, you're always encouraged to just take a little bit from the style and kind of find your personal sound in it, which is a little different in CPEM 1. It really is about kind of making music in those particular styles. And one of the big things about this dubstep section in the course is, though we call it dubstep, that's what it's about, really we're trying to see how we can evolve with this music, right? So I had a huge challenge in making these courses that as soon as I made the course, a new style was out. Like, where's the trap section? Like there's something new here. And so when I developed this, I'm like, wow, what do I do? How do I deal with that? I know my material is going to be out of date in a year or two, right? That's a hard thing as a teacher to put all this work in and know that. So I designed the dubstep section really as, like, how do we analyze a new style? So I kind of take it from, okay, what if this is new? How do we go about figuring out what are the important points of this style? How do we adapt with it? How do we become a musician that can last year after year when the music's changing around it? So we try to see not just what the characteristics of dubstep are, but how we would go about analyzing a new style and then composing within it. Yeah.
I got a great question.
Oh, great. I love great
questions.
Really good. Yeah.
And all you producers out there, pay attention because this is really good. Besides producing as much as possible, are there any other things that you've done to help develop skills, your training, rhythm, etc., that have crossed over into electronic music production?
So this is a great question.
Yeah.
Who was it?
Anonymous.
Anon. Oh man, I love Anon. He's great. So the thing is, and I figured this out over and over. Like, I also teach like orchestral music at Berklee, so I teach a wide range of music, and we always come to this conclusion by the end of these courses, and we have chats all the time. So I'm talking to the students all the time, and we always come to the conclusion that really, it's just music. And all the rules are the same. When we start talking about these rhythmic techniques, we talk about harmony, but really it's all music. And the fundamentals are really the same. This just happens to use some electronic tools. So, I found that my traditional musical training has served me really, really well. Learning harmony, learning rhythm has been an amazing tool. And honestly, the most important though is learning my instrument. I have to say, and I struggle with this because a lot of my students are DJs. They come from a very different perspective. I find that DJs tend to have a much better sense of how to arrange a song, right? They understand how just the ebb and flow of emotion works over the course of a piece, and I'm constantly learning from them. But I find for me, everything goes back to my bass playing, So from a very young age, I was a bass player, still am, and I find that everything I do kind of relates back to that. So the parting lesson I give to most of my students is keep playing your instrument. Because as you play your instrument, it's an experiential learning, right? You're feeling the vibrations of your instrument, your piano, your guitar, your vocal folds. You're feeling that. You're experiencing it. You're hearing harmony and feeling harmony, not just like reading numbers on a page. That experience of it, I think, is the most important. And then for a DJ, I think keep playing the music. Now, besides that, the other thing that I think helped me the most was learning synthesis. And it's not just that when you learn synthesis that learn how to make a specific sound, but it gives you two things. First, it forces you to listen a lot, to really find specifics. So you're making a little sound, you're going to turn that knob a little bit, and you're going to hear that slight difference. And I relate it back to like learning to tune my instrument. Everything goes back to the instrument. You learn to tune your instrument, you change that tuning pad a tiny little bit, right? And in doing that over and over, your ear starts learning the tiny differences, right? Your ear gets this kind of laser beam focus on things, right? And I feel like when I learned synthesis, I had that same kind of focus, but with timbre. And I don't think in all my traditional training that I really got a good language for timbre. I never got it, right? It sounds like a violin, it sounds like an oboe, but what's the specifics, right? Is it inharmonic, is it harmonic, right? What are the partials? Which partials are stronger? How does that timbre evolve over time? And those are the kind of conversations we have in CPEM too. In the first lesson, we talk about harmonicity, which is, do the partials line up to the harmonic series? And if they don't, what does that sound like? If they do, what does that sound like? And then you start training your ear, and then you start hearing differently. You start noticing inharmonic sounds and harmonic sounds around you. You become better at identifying new characteristics of new styles and applying them. And then you become better at understand. And the funny thing is, I start applying synthesis terminology to acoustic instruments.
Oh, really?
I'll be like, oh, that drum has, the amp envelope on that drum has a long decay, but it's a guy playing a drum, right? It doesn't have, but it gives you a language. Because before I learned synthesis, I wouldn't have a way to describe it. And and now you have a way to describe it. You can remember it. So those are the things I would say: study the tools, and then just study music and your instrument. Yeah.
Comes full circle.
It does. It does.
That's great. It's a good question. I really enjoyed that.
Thanks, Anonymous.
Yes. They may not be anonymous. I just don't have your name, so I apologize for that. What was your inspiration to choose the topics in CPEM 2?
A little selfish maybe. It's the stuff that I love to talk about. For me, I have to admit that music technology itself is kind of like an end. I find it artistic itself. I love the way these things look and they feel and they're designed. So a lot of it's the stuff that I love to talk about. I love to talk about synthesis. I love the sound of synthesizer. I love to talk about harmony and rhythms. So that's one way. That's one reason. The other thing, I wanted to focus on in this class was kind of a wide range, right? So what are all the elements someone really needs? And maybe I won't be able to cover them all in complete depth, but I gave all the starting points, right? So by CPEM 2, it's quite advanced, but I can't get very advanced with harmony. I don't have the time, right? We have so many harmony classes here, right? So I can't give that in depth, but I can give a starting point. Right, and I can say, okay, this is the kind of harmony necessary that you use most commonly in these styles, right? Mm-hmm. And I think so. That was my hope, that we would definitely get into the tools of electronic music, because that's really, I feel like, the only thing that separates electronic music from music is these tools. So we have to dive into these deeply, and that's where I go really, really depth. But then the other things, like specifically harmony, I kind of touch the surface of, but I try to give a structure to hold everything. So we look at the cycle of fifths in great depth, in a way that people probably haven't checked out before. It's kind of a really interesting kind of organizational structure. So hopefully people get kind of a way to store this information, kind of harmonic beginning. And then for rhythm, we analyze kind of contemporary electronic styles and see what rhythms are really common. Like in dubstep, we're really seeing the introduction of triplets quite a bit, and across styles like trap, we're also seeing the introduction of kind of interesting polyrhythms and different approaches to swing and groove. So those kind of starting points, and then and so I guess that's it. So that's how I came up with the topics, and then a range of styles, and style functions as kind of a structure for everything, right? We have to have some way to organize the class, and I think the styles provided that. Okay, we'll work on this style and create a project in it, and each class has basically 3 big projects, and so they're each kind of based on a style.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I think, unfortunately, we have run out of time.
Oh, well,
but a giant thank you to you, our guest,
pleasure.
Loudon Stearns. A virtual round of applause from around the world. Okay, and a great big thank you to all of you as well. Thank you so much for joining us in the open house. We have these open houses periodically, and we really appreciate you coming here to learn with us.
Thank you. I hope we get a chance to study together sometime.
And in addition, we have a upcoming term starting where all of Loudon's classes are enrolling, as well as all the other classes they mentioned, a lot of harmony classes, bass, guitar,
mastering, great stuff,
everything under the sun. If you just go to online.berklee.edu, you'll see everything there, and you can reach an advisor by clicking on the little email button there, or you can call us as well. In fact, the term that starts on September 30th, we're having a $100 off for anyone who's attending the open house today. You just need to call an advisor by this Friday at 5 p.m. Eastern Time. And the number is 866-BERKLEE. That's BERKLEE, if you didn't know. And if you're international, you can dial 617-747-2146. Thanks again for joining us, and take care.